Hello everyone, I'm Himanshi Hans. Welcome to today's video. Today we are going to discuss an important Supreme Court judgment delivered recently in the case of Ivan Rathinam versus Milan Joseph. It was delivered on 28 January 2025 by a bench comprising Honorable Justice Suryakant and Honorable Justice Ujjal Bhuyan. This case revolves around a dispute concerning paternity, legitimacy, maintenance, and the role of DNA tests in determining a child's biological father. The judgment clarifies the distinction between legitimacy and paternity and reaffirms the legal presumption under Section 112 of the Indian Evidence Act 1872. It also addresses whether a family court can reopen a maintenance petition despite a final decision by a civil court. Let us come to the facts of this case. The respondent, Milan Joseph's mother, married Mr. Raju Kurian in 1989. They had a daughter in 1991. The respondent was born on June 11, 2001, while the marriage was still valid. Mr. Raju Kurian's name was registered as respondent's father in official records. In 2003, the respondent's parents separated. In 2006, they got divorced. Respondent's mother later claimed that the appellant, Ivan Rathinam, was the respondent's biological father due to an extramarital affair. She sought to change the father's name in the birth register, but the authorities refused without a court order. Respondent's mother filed a suit in the Munsif Court in 2007 seeking a declaration that appellant was the respondent's biological father. They also sought a mandatory injunction for the appellant to apply for a name change in the birth register. They additionally filed a maintenance petition under Section 125 of the Criminal Procedure in the Family Court claiming support from the appellant. The Munsif Court ordered the appellant to undergo a paternity test, but the appellant challenged this before the Kerala High Court. The High Court ruled that a DNA test could only be ordered if non-access between the mother and her husband was proven. Subsequently, the Munsif Court dismissed the original suit in 2009, stating that since respondent's mother and Raju Kurian cohabited during the relevant period, the presumption under Section 112 of the Indian Evidence Act applied, making respondent the legitimate son of Raju Kurian. The family court, following this decision, closed the maintenance petition in 2010 but allowed its revival if an appeal against the Munsif Court's decision succeeded. Respondent and his mother filed appeals to the Kerala High Court, but all courts upheld the Munsif Court's decision, confirming respondent's legitimacy as Raju Kurian's son. The High Court's 2011 ruling was never challenged further and attained finality. Now let us come to the second round of litigation, which was the revival of maintenance case. In 2015, the respondent, who was now an adult, filed an application before the family court to revive the maintenance petition, citing medical expenses and the lack of support from Raju Kurian. The family court revived the petition, reasoning that legitimacy and paternity were separate issues and that it alone had jurisdiction to decide maintenance. Appellant challenged this decision before the High Court, arguing that the matter was already settled and that the family court lacked the power to reopen it. Let us now come to the impugned judgment of the High Court. The High Court wide impugned judgment dated 21st May 2018 determined the following points. First, the legitimacy of birth was irrelevant when considering the right of the child to receive maintenance from their biological father. Second, the presumption of legitimacy does not prevent an inquiry into the true paternity of a child. Third, since paternity and legitimacy operate in different spheres, a declaration on the legitimacy of a child by a civil court would not impede an inquiry into paternity by the family court for the purpose of determining maintenance. And lastly, the civil courts lack jurisdiction to determine the legitimacy of the respondent owing to the exclusive jurisdiction of the family court. Now let us come to the issues before the Honorable Supreme Court. The Supreme Court had to decide on the following key issues. First, whether the presumption of legitimacy, if not displaced, determines paternity in law. Second, whether the civil court had the jurisdiction to entertain the original suit, and accordingly, whether the family court was entitled to reopen the maintenance petition. Third, whether the second round of litigation initiated by the respondent was barred by the principle of res judicata. Let us come to the arguments by the parties. We'll be first discussing the arguments by the appellant, who is Mr. Ivan Rathinam, the alleged father. First, legitimacy determines paternity. Since the respondent was born during a valid marriage, he is presumed to be the legitimate child of Mr. Raju Kurian. This means he can only seek maintenance from Mr. Kurian and not from a third party. Second, finality of judgment. Three courts had already ruled that respondent was legally Mr. Kurian's son. The issue could not be reopened under the guise of maintenance by the family court. Third, DNA test not warranted. A DNA test should only be allowed if respondent's mother could prove that she had no access to her husband when the respondent was conceived. No such proof was provided here. Now let us come to the arguments by the respondent. First, distinction between legitimacy and paternity. While legitimacy can be determined through a legal presumption, paternity is a matter of science. Just because the respondent is legally Mr. Kurian's son does not mean he cannot claim maintenance from his biological father. Second, right to know the truth. The respondent argued that he had a right to know his real father and to claim maintenance from him. Third, jurisdiction of family court. Since maintenance can only be decided by the family court under explanation F of section 7 of the Family Courts Act 1984, it is well within its jurisdiction to also determine paternity when posed with the question of maintenance. Now let us come to the Supreme Court's judgment. Does legitimacy determine paternity? The court held that under section 112 of the Indian Evidence Act 1872, a child born during a valid marriage is conclusively presumed to be the husband's legitimate child unless non-access is proved. Since respondent's mother and Mr. Kurian were living together when the respondent was conceived, the presumption of legitimacy remains intact. Allegations of an extramarital affair are not enough to displace this presumption. The court held that it is well established that access and non-access under section 112 do not require a party to prove beyond reasonable doubt that they had or did not have sexual intercourse at the time the child could have been begotten. Access merely refers to the possibility of an opportunity for marital relations. The challenge raised before the High Court that paternity and legitimacy are distinct or independent concepts was held to be a misdirected notion and was rejected. The High Court's view that paternity can be determined independent of the concurrent findings regarding the legitimacy of the child was not sustained. Did the civil court have jurisdiction? The court held that Munsif court and sub-judge had jurisdiction to decide legitimacy. The court held that it is a well-settled law that the family court has exclusive jurisdiction over a suit or proceeding for a declaration as to the legitimacy of a person. However, the family court cannot entertain any proceedings for a declaration of legitimacy without a claim on the marital relationship. The family court has jurisdiction over maintenance but not over a declaration of paternity when no marital relationship is in question. The court also considered whether the family court could reopen the maintenance petition, and it held that the family court had already closed the case in 2010, and the condition for reopening was that respondent or his mother should win the appeal against the civil court's decision, but they lost at every stage. The family court's decision to revive the maintenance case in 2015 was wrong in law. Now, coming to whether the second litigation was barred by res judicata, the court held that the matter had already been settled by multiple courts, including the High Court. Once a final judgment has been passed, the same issue cannot be relitigated under a different label. Now, let us come to the concluding points by the Honorable Supreme Court. The Supreme Court allowed the appeal and set aside the High Court's judgment. It ruled that, first, legitimacy determines paternity under Section 112 of the Indian Evidence Act 1872 until the presumption is successfully rebutted by proving non-access. Second, the Munsif Court and the Sub-Judge Court possess jurisdiction to entertain the original suit which dealt with the question of the legitimacy of the respondent. The family court erred in reopening the maintenance petition when the self-imposed condition was not satisfied. Fourth, the impugned proceedings initiated by the respondent were held to be barred by the principle of res judicata. Fifth, the proceedings before the family court were quashed. And sixth, any claim by the respondent based upon the perceived relationship of paternity qua the appellant was negated. And last, the respondent was presumed to be the legitimate son of Mr. Raju Kurian. I hope you understood the judgment and found the discussion to be fruitful. Thank you so much for watching. See you next time. Bye-bye.